Lesbian parents of Reddit, how did you decide who got pregnant? I work with a lot of lesbian families. Usually, one might have a stronger desire to bear children, so that is the one who does. Sometimes both do, so they may each bear a child. Sometimes it's about genetics, and someone with a condition or predisposition may ask the other to bear any children. Sometimes none want to bear children, so they adopt, foster, surrogate. It's usually just an honest conversation about who may want to give birth, if anyone. If either were from an Asian family, I'm sure many other cultures are like this, but can only speak for majority of my own. The grandma would come in and take over everything, cook, clean, everything for everyone. But it would be done her way, and all of it would be based on old wives' tales. The partners can get really bulldozed over, and the house can smell like vinegared eggs and pig's trotter for weeks, unfortunately, unless boundaries are set. I know a lesbian couple who tried for months for the older of the two to get pregnant, with the intention that the younger would carry the second child, but they were unsuccessful for months. So then they decided to inseminate both partners each month, and whoever got pregnant first would deliver their first child. So naturally, they both fell pregnant the same month. I was working for a women's lifestyle magazine at the time alongside one of the women, and the magazine ended up doing a story on them and their unique situation, clearly not so unique based on this discussion board. And yet they might not have. I have two friends who had babies almost at the same time. One was sick the whole time, had a terrible birthing experience, and had pelvic floor injuries afterwards that required surgery. The other glowed, as they say, but a reasonably short labor and delivery without any complications, and recovered quite quickly. A different friend had an uneventful pregnancy but found herself unable to walk by the second day after birth and needed to be readmitted and had follow-up physio for the next few months. There's a lesbian couple here I know that has been taking in foster kids for years. They flunked fostering and adopted two of them along the way. Interestingly, there was resistance to letting them adopt, until it became clear it would save this very red state money on foster child fees. There was also resistance to letting them foster children. Then they offered to take troubled, difficult children that had bounced out of other fosters. I know it's not true in every case, but it's amazing the progress they made with some very damaged kids over the years, with patience, acceptance, and endless love. Chris and Abby, you guys are the best. I'm really curious what the legal situation looks like for a scenario like that. How do you nullify the sperm donor's legal obligations to the child, that obviously must exist for something on a large scale like a sperm bank, but I wonder how you navigate that in a, private transaction kind of scenario. I would gladly donate sperm to allow my friends to conceive if they asked me, but only if I was certain that if 3 years down the road if they divorce, I'm not suddenly stuck with child support because I'm legally the father. Depends on state adoption and surrogacy laws. In most states you're on the hook until either of the following: 1. You donated through a licensed sperm bank, or 2. A court-approved parent adopts and takes your responsibility. The legal theory is basically burden is on you. We don't want to leave kids without two functional adults caring for them, and we also don't want to burden the taxpayers for your failings. In Arizona, which is a very Republican state, if a couple is married, the other spouse is assumed to be the other parent, even for same-sex couples. Legal paternity isn't just biology. A married couple's presumption of paternity can trump biological paternity, as the state has an interest in preserving families within marriage. Also, who is on the birth certificate creates a presumption of paternity. So if a married lesbian couple has a baby and both moms are on the BC, the non-birth mom wouldn't be able to get out of legal responsibility for the child if they divorce 3 years down the road. Well, my brother once asked me about this same scenario, more or less, when he and his wife were first trying to have kids. His sperm, her eggs, But my body, it's better with the close bio relative of one of the parents, and her sisters were either underage or not adequate. They both knew I was fairly healthy and my body was clean, no question. Still, that would have been a weird situation to explain to anyone, that I was carrying my brother's baby. XD, luckily it didn't come to that. He has 2 children now and is done. You also can't just rock up at your local orphanage and take home a baby. Baby adoption is at least as expensive, if not more in many cases, as IVF, and adopting through the foster care system might be cheaper, but often, usually, mainly you're signing up to care for children with complicated extra needs, trauma/health problems, etc., and not everyone is suited to that. A lesbian couple with no fertility issues, on the other hand, can buy a few vials of sperm online relatively cheaply, and Bob's your uncle. People always suggest adoption as though it's an original thinking outside the box solution, when in reality that usually know nothing about it. There are also tactical get-togethers. I have a cousin whose mom is lesbian. She married my uncle in order to have a baby. This was in the early 80s, different times. My uncle has since passed away. She basically left him once the pregnancy was confirmed. Dishonest, yes, but everyone was adult about it. She never prevented my uncle from seeing his son or from interacting with his half-sister, my uncle's child from his first marriage. She remained friends with my uncle until his death. When my uncle got the terminal cancer diagnosis, he made it very clear that his ex-wife, her partner, and his son would be welcome at the funeral and would not be denied their grief. The lie was necessary in the early 1980s. I'm glad we have advanced in that regard. WTH, I've never heard of this before, but as someone who procrastinates a lot, this might actually help me if I'm ever in a scenario like this to get up and do chores. Let's say I don't want to empty the dishwasher, so my sibling and I play a game to see who should do it. If I win, then great, it's not my turn to do the chore. If I lose, I'd still be in a good mood because of the game we played, and might be in such a good mood I won't even mind doing whatever needs to be done as much. I'm gonna have to try this. Thank you. It's been a lot. The first provider I did a consult with was not very LGBTQ friendly, not hostile by any means, but the forms all assumed the male partner, and I was only provided info on IVF when I asked for a price list. Those little slides that add up to feeling uncomfortable. I finally lined up an appointment with a different provider, but they didn't have an opening until September. It's hard having so much of my timeline dependent on other people and jump through so many hoops. Unfortunately, you will need to be on those injections for more than 9 months, since they recommend you stay on them for 6 weeks postpartum, especially if you are nursing. I only did it for 4 weeks after birth, as I didn't have any issues, and my OB was an idiot who made me schedule all my final appointments, even my postpartum one, before we knew when I was going to have my child. I was induced at 41 weeks despite the MTS and being 35. There is a Facebook group for women with May-Thurner syndrome which started with a focus on moms and can help with a lot of questions. I wish you luck with your new doctor, and it is worth it even with all those months if painful injections. My wife carried both of our 2 children. Originally, the plan was to carry one each, and I started trying a year after she had our first child. I tried for 18 months and was unsuccessful, and we really didn't want a big age gap between our kids, so she tried again, was pregnant on her second attempt. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed, and a little regretful that we didn't try harder to figure out how to make it happen for me. That being said, we have 2 healthy, happy kids that I love more than anything, so I wouldn't change a thing. We were also able to use the same donor for both kids, so they're fully biological siblings. We are also part of an online group of other families who use the donor, so we can share photos of the kids, and make sure no one brings a sibling home one day. Lol. There's almost 20 of them now, which is cool. I don't identify as lesbian, but I, a female, was married to a woman for 8 years. We are divorced and co-parenting right now. I wanted to be the one to carry both of the children. We decided that was the best idea due to her physically demanding job. I gave birth to our daughter first and a few years later tried for our son. However, I found out I had ovarian cysts. So, my wife, at the time, said she would try it one time to see if it worked for her, and it did. She gave birth to our son. So, to answer the question, it was more of a medical necessity that both of us had one child, and, yes, they both have the same father. I don't think it is rude at all and I appreciate the question. I truly don't like to define my sexuality. It really is a socially acceptable way of telling people who you sleep with. But, for answering your question, I would consider myself pansexual. I am attracted to all people. I don't really care what is between your legs. My ex-wife identifies as a lesbian, meaning she is exclusively attracted to women only. We ended up meeting and falling in lust and getting married. Yes, it was a same-sex relationship, but it wasn't exclusively lesbian. I really hope this helps understand a bit better. Keep being curious. I had 2 people in one of my college classes come to this agreement. The whole situation was quite awkward because I sat next to both of these people who did not know each other, one gay guy, one lesbian. Like the second class in, they each found out they were in a same-sex relationship and both wanted children but did not have the money for a lab to do the whole process, so they started talking and figured they would hook up with each other's partner and each keep a kid. They talked about this every class and I guess ended up hooking up a few weeks later. I know they were trying to draft up paperwork and stuff, but I'm not sure how well that would protect them. This was a 16-week class, so I never saw either of them after the class. I am kind of curious if things ended up working out or if things went sour. The whole situation was kind of bizarre, but hopefully things worked out how they wanted. Not a parent yet, but my fiancée and I are planning in roughly 3 years' time. She wants to have a pregnancy by age 30 because of goes to be expecting. We both are hoping to bear a child and will likely stop at 2 kids, hopefully within 2 years of each other. But biology is what it will. We also hope to use the same sperm donor so our kids have a genetic link of some kind. We don't want to use someone we know though because that is awkward enough with our personal relationships. With a goal of 1 child and 2 mothers wanting to carry, I'm not sure what to say. Pregnancy, however terrible it can be, is something I want to experience. The same with my partner. It would be a very long conversation for me to give that up. I would if I agreed with her arguments because I refuse to be totally irrational with children. But it would be a very hard decision. Should one of us miscarry, I don't know what will happen. If it's me, we'll probably try again, but if it's her, I wonder if she wants to with her family history of difficult birth and birth defects after the 20s. It's up in the air, but I love her and, more importantly, trust her to do what she feels is right for our family. When we've discussed our concerns, we will meet what comes with the thorough conversation about how these events may play out. The miscarriage subject is one I intend to have when we start trying. My sister and her wife both carried a baby. They used the same registered donor so that their daughters would have a biological parent in common. Their daughters are about 10 months apart, legally where we live. This means that the person who carried the baby has sole custody of that baby. That is, in the event of a divorce, custody would not be a state-mandated factor for determination. The birth certificate has optional lines for putting in paternity information. You cannot list another female there, so these lines have been left blank in these scenarios. Both of them wanted to have the experience of carrying a child. One was older by more than 5 years, so she went first. My wife is currently pregnant with our first child. We both plan to carry at least once. My wife went first because she wanted to, for a number of reasons, but family dynamic was a concern for her and she felt far more comfortable if she went first. She's older. If we had switched roles, she would be on the borderline of a geriatric pregnancy, which is higher risk. She's physically more healthy. I'm more on the overweight side and would need to lose some weight before becoming pregnant. I'm working on it. But she was physically ready to conceive when we were ready to start. She wants to close up shop sooner. She has PMDD, which makes the hormone fluctuations leading up to her period very difficult to cope with. She can become severely depressed during this time. She'd like to start birth control once she's done birthing children. The plan is for me to carry our second child. We will use the same donor so the children will be genetic half-siblings. We have other friends that are coupled and they decided in different ways. One couple may adopt children if they choose to have them, as they both would have a difficult time becoming pregnant and maintaining a healthy pregnancy. Another couple has decided that only one of them will carry, as the other does not want to be pregnant ever. It would be dysphoric to them. They may explore reciprocal IVF. As someone, by F, who is currently going through the adoption process, it is not as easy as you think. First off, adoption is expensive and you get almost no help like you would with medical insurance. Depending on where you live, I live in the US. There are a ton of adoption agencies that do not take on LGBT cases. Also, the agency I chose know more about us than even our own parents do, and any number of things could prevent us from passing the background checks and even the home study as a whole. Another factor is court agencies require you be married for a minimum of 5 years. LGBT marriages in most places have only been legal that long, so unless you elbowed at the courthouse right away and decided to not do a wedding, that would make you ineligible on that alone. Note: I know the laws are not the same everywhere, but these are some of the reasons you requested. Also, it doesn't matter how a couple chooses to grow their family, and they should never be judged for doing what is right for them. Love is love after all. I don't agree, and I am adopted. Adoption is great, more people should do it, but the right to procreate is not something I'm willing to step on. Not even a little bit. What I don't like is that I often hear this criticism only applied to lesbian couples, as if their situation is somehow super unique and they went to extremes that normal people don't have to. Finding a sperm donor one way or the other isn't really jumping through hoops. It's one tiny, easy step on the much more complicated bit of having a baby. My wife and I, a straight couple, had to jump through some hoops to get pregnant as well. Yep, some WLW couples choose to do this. The big problem with this strategy is legal problems regarding custody and parentage. The biological father will have to relinquish parental rights and let the non-birth mother take over, but this isn't an automatic process for DIY inseminations, and even if they do this properly, there have been some attempts for the courts to go after the biological father again if the mother ever applies for government assistance for the child. Sperm donors sign away or specify their rights when they donate. If they are just donating to a clinic, I think they sign firm stating that they have no rights to any resulting children and also whether or not the child can get the donor's contact info through the clinic. If the donor is donating to someone they know, then I would hope that the donors and recipients would spell all of that out before the whole process begins. We have 2 kids, use the same donor. We used 1 egg from me and 1 from my wife, and I carried both pregnancies. My wife's gender expression is on the masculine side and she had no desire to be pregnant, so I carried her egg. Science. When we went to do our second parent adoption, it basically required the schematic and the law required that we both adopt both children. I'm still surly about it, to be honest. I have 2 very close friends who are married lesbian couple. In their case, they wanted to find donors who matched their general physical qualities. So one of them is smaller, blonde, blue eyes, tiny frame, and so she wanted to find a male donor with those characteristics, thus giving a better chance of her offspring carrying those genetic qualities. Her wife is athletic, dark hair, dark eyes, etc., and so she too wanted to find a male with those similar traits. My wife is a sex educator and a doula. She desperately wants to experience pregnancy and give birth to our child. I'm a relatively butch woman who has never felt comfortable with the idea of carrying a child. I told her I would though, for us, and she told me that if she couldn't carry she wasn't sure she could mentally handle me being able to. We decided on fostering or adopting if that became the case. Communication, trust, and validating your partner's feelings are so important in the process.